Commander Lisa Kane stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Intrepid and looked at the massive screen before her. The sight made her breath catch in her throat. A huge alien ship drifted in the empty space between stars like a dark metal mountain. Its hull was covered in strange marks and scars from thousands of years in space. The alien vessel was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It stretched for over a kilometer, and its design was unlike any ship in human records. No engines were visible on its surface. No weapons could be seen, yet somehow it maintained perfect shape despite floating in space for what looked like centuries. Chief Science Officer Amanda Price checked her instruments for the third time in 10 minutes. Her hands shook slightly as she read the data. No life signs came from the massive ship. No power readings showed on her screens. The vessel was completely dead, but something about it felt wrong, in ways she could not explain. Lisa had been exploring deep space. For 15 years she had seen derelict ships before, but this one was different. The metal hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols covered every surface, and they glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The glow got brighter when the Intrepid moved closer. Security Chief Rebecca Stone prepared her away team with extra care. She selected her best people for this mission. Marine Sergeant Kelly Adams checked her weapons twice. Engineer Patricia Wells loaded her tools with steady hands. Dr. Nancy Roberts packed her medical supplies and scientific equipment. They all felt the same unease about the mysterious ship. The airlock on the alien vessel opened without resistance, as if it had been waiting for them. The corridors inside were huge and built for beings much larger than humans. Emergency lighting flickered along the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced as the team moved deeper into the ship. Every wall was covered with symbols and markings. The writing appeared in dozens of different styles and languages. Some symbols were carved deep into the metal, while others seemed to be burned into the surface. Dr. Roberts recorded everything with her scanner, while Patricia Wells took samples of the strange materials. The deeper they went, the more disturbing the ship became. Bodies of alien creatures lay scattered throughout the corridors, but they had not died from violence or accident. These beings had simply collapsed where they stood as if all life had suddenly left their bodies. Their faces showed expressions of pure terror. Rebecca found the first translation device in what appeared to be the command center. The machine activated when she touched it, and alien words began appearing on screens throughout the room. The translation was rough but clear enough to understand the aliens called themselves the HFY, and this ship was their last refuge. Amanda worked with the translation system to decode more of the messages. What she found made her call Lisa immediately. The walls contained the same warning written over and over in every alien language the HFY had encountered. Each message was identical and terrifying. The warnings spoke of a species from the third planet of a yellow star system, a species that the HFY had encountered and tried to conquer. The aliens described humans as the species that never yields. They wrote about battles that lasted for generations and enemies who grew stronger. With every defeat, one message stood out among all the others. It was written in larger symbols and placed in the center of every room. The HFY warned other species to avoid contact with humans at all costs. They described humans as relentless, beings who could not be broken or convinced to surrender. Dr. Roberts discovered the ship's databanks and began downloading everything she could find. The records told an incredible story. The HFY had been the most powerful empire in this part of the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved dozens of species. Nothing had ever stood against them successfully until they found Earth 12,000 years ago, when humans were still primitive by galactic standards. The HFY expected an easy conquest of a backward world. What they found instead changed their understanding of what was possible in warfare. The records showed that early humans did not fight like other species when faced with superior technology, and overwhelming numbers they did not surrender. Instead, they adapted and learned. They turned every defeat into a lesson and every loss into motivation to become stronger. Patricia Wells found the most disturbing records in the engineering section. The HFY had documented every battle with humans in precise detail. Their military analysts had studied human behavior and reached conclusions that terrified even their strongest warriors. Humans did not just refuse to surrender, they seemed incapable of accepting that defeat was permanent. Other species would eventually reach a point where continued resistance became impossible. But humans never reached that point. They would find new ways to fight even when all seemed lost. The final records showed the Kethvar Empire falling apart. The constant war with humans had drained their resources and broken their will to fight. Other conquered species saw the humans' example and began their own rebellions. The mighty Kethvar Empire collapsed, not from a single defeat, but from the gradual realization that some battles could never truly be won. Kelly Adams found the most chilling evidence in the personal logs of Kethvar soldiers. They wrote about human warriors who would continue fighting, even when mortally wounded. They described humans who would sacrifice themselves to save others or to gain strategic advantages that might not pay off for generations. The away team spent 6 hours exploring the massive ship. Every room told the same story. The Kethvar had tried everything to defeat humanity. Superior technology did not work. Overwhelming numbers failed. Psychological warfare had no effect. The humans kept coming no matter what obstacles were placed before them. As they prepared to return to the intrepid, Rebecca made one final discovery. In the deepest part of the ship, she found a chamber filled with holographic records. The recordings showed the ship's final moments as it fled from human pursuit. The last entry was a warning to any species that might find the ship. The warning was simple but profound. Do not engage the humans from the third world. They are not like other species. They do not know how to give up. They will never stop coming for you no matter how long it takes or how much it costs them. They are the species that cannot be broken. Lisa Kane reviewed all the evidence her team had gathered and felt a chill run down her spine. Humanity had always known they were alone in the galaxy. Now they discovered they had a reputation among aliens they had never met. The ancient warnings carved in alien stone spoke of human determination and refusal to yield. The implications were staggering. If these records were true, then humanity had unknowingly destroyed the most powerful empire in galactic history 12,000 years ago. The descendants of those early humans now traveled among the stars with technology that would have amazed their ancestors. As the Intrepid prepared to return to Earth with its incredible cargo, Lisa wondered what other alien species might be watching humanity expansion into space. The Kethvar warnings had been preserved for thousands of years, suggesting that other aliens took them seriously. The message was clear across all the different alien languages and all the different warning systems. Humans were different from every other species in the galaxy. They possessed something that made them impossible to defeat through normal means. They were the species that never backs down. Amanda finished her analysis of the alien technology and shook her head in amazement. The Kethvar had been incredibly advanced. Their weapons could destroy planets and their shields could deflect any known energy. Yet none of this had been enough to stop primitive humans armed with nothing but determination and creativity. The return journey to Earth would take several days, but Lisa knew their discovery would change everything. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and they already had a reputation among the stars. The question now was whether that reputation would be seen as a threat or an opportunity by whatever other species might be out there watching. The news from the Intrepid reached Earth in 3 days and changed everything. Admiral Catherine Wells commanded the defense of Earth from the massive orbital station Defiance. She had been preparing for possible alien contact for years, but never imagined it would happen like this. Earth governments worked around the clock to analyze the Kethvar records. Scientists and military leaders studied every piece of information, while linguists worked to improve the translations. The picture that emerged was both amazing and terrifying. Humanity had been fighting aliens for 12,000 years without knowing it. The early battles had been forgotten by human history, but remembered perfectly by alien civilizations. The warnings carved in Kethvar stone had spread throughout the galaxy, making humans famous before they ever left their homeworld. Helen Grant led the team studying the alien language systems. She was the best xenoarchaeologist on Earth, and her translations revealed details that made government leaders very nervous. The Kethvar had not been alone in their fear of humans. Other alien species had similar warnings in their historical records. Before Earth could fully process these discoveries, 3 massive fleets appeared at the edge of the solar system. Their ships were enormous and clearly built by different alien species. The lead vessels transmitted messages in perfect human languages. Requesting permission to approach Earth, Admiral Wells found herself facing the most important decision in human history. 3 alien civilizations had come to Earth at the same time. This could not be coincidence. These species had been watching humanity and waiting for the right moment to make contact. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Coalition and represented 47 different species spread across thousands of star systems. They had been the dominant power in this region of space for over 10,000 years. Their technology was far beyond anything humans had developed. The lead ambassador was a being called Zithka, who appeared to be made of living crystal. Its voice resonated through special translation devices that converted alien thoughts into human speech. The message it delivered was both diplomatic and threatening. Zithka explained that humanity had been noticed by galactic civilization. The discovery of the Kethvar tomb ship had accelerated certain events that the Coalition had been planning for centuries. They knew about human expansion into space, and they knew about human military capabilities. Dr. Grant was chosen to represent Earth in the first formal meeting with alien representatives. She brought all her research about the Kethvar Empire and prepared to learn about humanity's true place in galactic history. The Coalition representatives met with human leaders aboard the station Defiance in a conference room, specially modified for the occasion. Beings from different worlds gathered around a table designed to accommodate various alien body types. Zithka began by explaining the true history of the Kethvar Empire. They had been the most aggressive military force the galaxy had ever seen. For 3,000 years, they had expanded their territory by conquering weaker species and enslaving entire populations. No species had ever successfully resisted Kethvar expansion until they encountered Earth. The Coalition had detailed records of what happened next, and the story they told amazed the human representatives. The Kethvar had made first contact with Earth during what humans called the late Pleistocene epoch. Primitive humans were still using stone tools and living in small tribes. The aliens expected to conquer the planet in a matter of weeks. What they found, instead, was something they had never encountered before. When threatened, humans did not flee or surrender as other species did. Instead, they fought back with a determination that the Kethvar could not understand. The alien records showed that early, humans adapted to every Kethvar tactic with incredible speed. They learned to use captured alien weapons and developed strategies that the Kethvar had never seen before. Most importantly, they never gave up no matter how badly they were losing. Dr. Grant presented her own analysis of the Kethvar records to the Coalition representatives. She had found evidence that the aliens had become increasingly frustrated with human resistance. Each battle was supposed to be the last, but humans always found ways to continue fighting. The Coalition explained that the Kethvar had tried everything to break human resistance. They had used superior technology, overwhelming numbers, psychological warfare, and even biological weapons. Nothing worked because humans seemed to grow stronger with each defeat. Ambassador Zithka shared recordings from Kethvar military leaders that showed their growing panic. The aliens had never encountered a species that could not be broken through traditional methods. They began to believe that humans were something entirely new in galactic evolution. The breaking point came when human resistance began inspiring other conquered species. The Kethvar Empire controlled hundreds of worlds filled with enslaved populations. When these species saw humans refusing to surrender, they began to hope that resistance was possible. Rebellions broke out across the Kethvar Empire as conquered species followed the human example. The aliens found themselves fighting wars on multiple fronts against enemies they had already defeated. The empire that had seemed invincible began to collapse from within. The Coalition revealed that they were descendants of the species that had rebelled against the Kethvar. They had survived only because humans had shown them that even the most powerful empire could be resisted. They owed their freedom to human example. Dr. Grant asked the obvious question about what happened to the humans who had fought the Kethvar. The Coalition explained that most of the human tribes that had battled the aliens were destroyed, but some survivors passed down stories of the war. These stories became myths and legends that inspired later human civilizations. The Coalition had been monitoring Earth ever since the Kethvar defeat. They watched human development with great interest as the species that had broken galactic history continued to evolve and advance. They knew that humans would eventually develop space travel. Zithka explained the Coalition purpose in coming to Earth now. The discovery of the Kethvar tomb ship meant that humans were learning about their galactic reputation. This knowledge would change how humanity approached expansion into space. The Coalition faced a difficult choice. They could welcome humans as allies, knowing that human nature made them potentially the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Or they could try to contain human expansion before it became unstoppable. The alien records contained detailed analysis of human psychology and behavior. Kethvar scientists had studied human decision-making and reached conclusions that worried every species in the Coalition. Humans did not think about acceptable losses the way other species did. They would continue, fighting even when victory seemed impossible. They would sacrifice everything for causes they believed in, and they never forgot enemies who threatened their survival. The Coalition had 47 member species with combined populations in the trillions. Their technology could destroy solar systems and their fleets could travel across the galaxy in weeks. Yet they were genuinely afraid of a single species from one small planet. Dr. Grant realized the true purpose of the Coalition visit. This was not just first contact but an evaluation. They needed to determine if modern humans still possessed the traits that had terrified the Kethvar Empire 12,000 years ago. The aliens explained that they had prepared a series of tests designed to measure human response to various challenges. These tests would help the Coalition understand whether the warnings about humans were still relevant in the modern era. Admiral Wells understood the implications immediately. The Coalition was not offering friendship or alliance. They were conducting an assessment to determine if humanity represented a threat that needed to be eliminated. The tests would begin immediately and would escalate until the Coalition had enough information. To make their decision, humanity would face challenges designed by species with thousands of years of military experience. Zithka made the Coalition position clear. They hoped that humans would prove to be reasonable beings who could be integrated into galactic civilization peacefully. But if humans demonstrated the same traits that had destroyed the Kethvar Empire, then other measures would be necessary. The meeting ended with humanity facing an impossible situation. They had learned that they were not alone in the universe and that their ancestors had already made enemies among the stars. The reputation carved in alien warnings would now be tested by the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Dr. Grant returned to her research. With new urgency, she needed to understand everything about the Kethvar War and human psychology. The fate of her species might depend on how well they understood their own nature. Admiral Wells began preparing Earth defenses for unknown challenges. The Coalition test could involve anything from diplomatic negotiations to full-scale warfare. Humanity would need to be ready for whatever the aliens might throw at them. The galactic revelation was complete. Humans were the species that had broken the greatest empire in galactic history without even knowing it. Now they would discover if that same determination would be enough to survive the attention of 47 alien civilizations. The Coalition message was delivered with diplomatic courtesy, but its meaning was clear. Humanity would face the same tests that had revealed the truth about human nature to the Kethvar Empire. The aliens needed to know if the ancient warnings were still accurate. Captain Maya Rodriguez commanded the heavy cruiser Persistence as part of the hastily assembled human defense fleet. Admiral Wells had given her the best crew available, but everyone knew they were facing unknown enemies with superior technology. The Coalition had provided coordinates to a neutral star system where the evaluation would take place. Human ships had 3 days to reach the testing ground and prepare for whatever challenges awaited them. Maya studied the intelligence, reports about Coalition military capabilities. The aliens possessed energy weapons that could vaporize mountains, shields that could deflect nuclear explosions, and ships that moved faster than anything in human space. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of human science. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez commanded the Marine units aboard the battleship Valiant. She had spent weeks studying the HFY records looking for clues about how ancient humans had survived against impossible odds. The record showed that human success had never depended on superior equipment or overwhelming numbers. Instead, humans had won through adaptability, creativity, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. These traits would be tested in ways that no human had ever experienced. The first test began without warning. Coalition ships dropped out of hyperspace around the human fleet and opened fire immediately. Their weapons tore through space with devastating precision, targeting human vessels. With surgical accuracy, the enemy ships were crewed by the Thexani warrior caste, a species bred specifically for combat. They had studied human tactics from the HFY records and prepared counters for every strategy humans had ever used. Maya watched, her tactical displays as coalition forces demonstrated their superiority. Human weapons barely scratched enemy shields, while alien energy beams cut through human armor like paper. The technological gap was even wider than anyone had imagined. The battleship Valiant took direct hits that crippled its engines and destroyed half its weapon systems. Sarah Martinez felt the ship shuddering under repeated impacts but refused to order evacuation. Instead, she had her engineering teams vent atmosphere from damaged sections, using the ship as a kinetic weapon. Sarah ordered ramming speed toward the coalition flagship. Her Marines prepared for boarding actions, while damage control teams kept the Valiant moving. Despite catastrophic structural damage, Commander Nicole Baker led her fighter squadron through the chaos of battle, watching human pilots adapt to impossible odds. When fighters were destroyed, the pilots did not retreat or surrender. Instead, they ejected and used magnetic clamps to attach themselves to passing enemy ships. Human creativity began to show as pilots turned their destroyed vessels into improvised weapons. They guided damaged fighters into enemy formations, creating debris fields that disrupted coalition attack patterns. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had superior determination. The Thexani found themselves facing tactics they had never encountered. Human Marines boarded their ships through breached hulls, using nothing but basic spacesuits and explosive charges. Their boarding actions were not coordinated military operations, but desperate individual efforts. Sarah Martinez led the final assault on the coalition flagship personally. She and her remaining Marines fought through alien corridors using captured weapons and improvised explosives. The Thexani warriors were individually superior, but humans fought with a desperation that unnerved them. Nicole Baker coordinated fighter attacks that made no tactical sense, but somehow worked human pilots ignored their own safety to create opportunities for others. They used their fighters as shields, missiles, and even communication relays when necessary. The turning point came when human forces stopped trying to match coalition technology and started using their own strengths instead. They abandoned conventional tactics and began improvising solutions that the aliens could not predict. Or Counter Maya Rodriguez watched the battle reports with amazement as human crews turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. When weapons failed, they used the ships themselves as weapons. When shields collapsed, they used the energy feedback to overload enemy systems. The coalition forces had expected to demonstrate their superiority in a quick, decisive battle. Instead, they found themselves engaged in a grinding conflict where humans refused to acknowledge that they were losing. Every destroyed human ship somehow made the remaining vessels more dangerous. The Thexani began to understand what the HFY records had tried to explain. Humans did not fight to win in the traditional sense, they fought to survive and learn and adapt. Every defeat taught them something new about their enemies. Sarah Martinez's breakthrough onto the coalition flagship bridge marked the end of the first test. Her Marines had suffered terrible casualties, but they had achieved something the Thexani had thought impossible. They had boarded and captured an advanced alien warship. The coalition forces retreated after losing half their fleet to what should have been an easy demonstration of superior firepower. The Thexani transmitted their reports to the coalition leadership with recommendations that made alien leaders very nervous. Admiral Wells reviewed the battle results from Earth with mixed feelings. Humanity had passed the first test, but at enormous cost. The human fleet had lost 60% of its ships and thousands of trained personnel. The disturbing part was that human forces had actually grown more effective as the battle continued. Unlike other species that became demoralized by losses, humans seemed to become more determined and creative. Dr. Grant analyzed the coalition response to the first test results. The aliens were clearly surprised by human performance, but not in ways that would lead to peaceful integration. The Thexani reports described human tactics as unprecedented and disturbing. The ancient warnings about humans were proving accurate in ways that worried even the coalition leadership. Humans really did refuse to accept defeat, and they really did grow stronger through adversity. Maya Rodriguez returned to Earth aboard the damaged Persistence with her crew, bruised but victorious. They had faced the most advanced military force in the galaxy and survived through determination and improvisation. Sarah Martinez's debriefing included detailed analysis of Thexani psychology and tactics. Her Marines had learned valuable information during their boarding actions, but the cost in human lives had been terrible. Nicole Baker reported that human pilots had developed entirely new combat techniques during the battle. They had learned to use coalition weapons against their owners and discovered weaknesses in alien ship designs. The first test had revealed something that worried both sides. Humans really were different from every other species the coalition had encountered. They possessed traits that made them potentially uncontrollable by conventional methods. Admiral Wells prepared for the next phase of coalition testing, knowing that the aliens would escalate their challenges. The first test had been designed to measure human military capabilities. The next test would examine human psychology and determination. The coalition sent another diplomatic message acknowledging human performance in the first test, but warning that more difficult challenges lay ahead. They needed to understand the full extent of human capabilities before making their final decision. Dr. Grant continued her research into Kethvar psychology, trying to understand how the ancient aliens had reached their conclusions about human nature. The record suggested that the Kethvar had become genuinely afraid of human unpredictability. The galactic evaluation was far from over. The coalition had 46 other member species, and each one had different capabilities and perspectives on warfare. Humans would face tests designed by civilizations with millions of years of combat experience. Maya Rodriguez began preparing her surviving crews for unknown challenges. The first test had shown that human determination could overcome technological disadvantages, but future tests might target other aspects of human nature. The message was spreading throughout coalition space that the ancient warnings about humans were proving accurate. This news would reach species that had been conquered by the Kethvar and remembered the stories of human resistance. Humanity had passed the first test, but in doing so had confirmed alien fears about human capabilities. The species that never backs down was about to face challenges designed specifically to break their legendary determination. The coalition's second wave brought something humanity had never imagined facing. The Void Hunters were cybernetic beings who had conquered death itself by transferring their consciousness into mechanical bodies. They had been fighting wars for thousands of years without ever losing a single individual. Captain Jennifer Morgan stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable, watching her sensors track the approaching hunter fleet. Their ships moved through space in perfect formation, each vessel identical to the others in size and capabilities. The hunters had volunteered to conduct the second test after reviewing the Thexani reports. They were confident that their technological superiority and immortal nature would break human resistance. Where the warrior caste had failed, Chief Engineer Victoria Shaw analyzed the enemy signatures and shook her head in disbelief. The hunter ships were bending the laws of physics using technology that should not have been possible. Their weapons created gravity wells that could crush entire squadrons. Tactical Officer Lauren Phillips watched her displays as hunter weapons tore holes in space-time itself. The enemy could manipulate fundamental forces to create attacks that human science said were impossible. They treated the universe as a tool to be reshaped at will. The first hunter attack destroyed 3 human ships in seconds, using weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Human shields and armor provided no protection against attacks that bypassed normal space entirely. Colonel Diane Foster commanded the Marine units preparing for what appeared to be a hopeless battle. The hunters could not be killed because they had no biological components to damage. They could repair their ships faster than human weapons could destroy them. Jennifer Morgan realized that conventional tactics would be completely useless against enemies who could manipulate physics and regenerate from any damage the hunters were testing. Human adaptability against impossible odds. The hunter ships demonstrated their superiority by absorbing every form of energy human weapons could produce. Their adaptive shields learned to counter each attack within seconds, making human firepower increasingly ineffective. Dr. Rachel Kim monitored the battle from the research vessel Discovery and watched in horror as hunter technology proved superior in every measurable way. The aliens could predict human tactics and counter them before they were even implemented. Victoria Shaw had been studying the ancient Kethvar records during the journey to the battle zone. She found references to similar enemies that the Kethvar had faced and defeated using conventional methods. But humans were not the Kethvar. The breakthrough came when Shaw realized that the hunters' greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. They had become so dependent on advanced technology that they could not comprehend opponents who would deliberately choose inferior methods. Shaw proposed something that seemed insane to every military leader who heard it. If the hunters could adapt to any technology, humans would abandon technology altogether and fight with the most basic equipment available. Colonel Foster understood the logic immediately. The hunters' adaptive systems were designed to counter advanced weapons and sophisticated tactics. They would not know how to respond to enemies using primitive methods. The plan required Marines to launch themselves at hunter ships using nothing but basic spacesuits, chemical rockets, and magnetic grapples. They would carry simple tools like plasma cutters and shaped charges instead of advanced weapons. Jennifer Morgan approved the desperate plan, knowing that it would mean sending her people to almost certain death. But the alternative was watching human forces being systematically destroyed by enemies they could not hurt. The assault began with Marines ejecting from their ships in basic emergency gear. They used chemical rockets to cross the space between fleets while hunter sensors tried to track what appeared to be debris. The hunter adaptive algorithms could not process the concept of intelligent beings deliberately choosing inferior equipment. Their defensive systems were calibrated to stop advanced projectiles and energy weapons, not people with hand tools. Diane Foster led the first boarding party onto a hunter ship through a breach cut with a plasma torch. The hunters, inside, could not understand how primitive cutting tools had penetrated their advanced armor. The Marines fought through hunter vessels using techniques that would have been familiar to their ancestors. Thousands of years ago, they used explosives and cutting tools to disable systems that the hunters thought were invulnerable. Rachel Kim watched in amazement as human forces turned hunter technological superiority into a liability. The aliens were so advanced that they could not defend against attacks they considered impossible. The hunters tried to adapt their systems to counter human tactics, but their algorithms had no data on opponents who deliberately used obsolete equipment. Every countermeasure they developed was designed for threats more advanced than what humans were actually using. Victoria Shaw coordinated the technical aspects of the assault, guiding Marines to critical systems that could be damaged with basic tools. The hunters had made their ships so advanced that simple mechanical damage could cause catastrophic failures. The battle turned into something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Advanced cybernetic beings with impossible technology were being defeated by humans using tools that belonged in museums. Jennifer Morgan realized that her crews were not just winning through determination, but through a completely different approach to problem solving. Other species tried to match their enemy's strength, but humans found ways to make enemy strength irrelevant. The hunter fleet began to retreat as their ships suffered damage they could not quickly repair. Human Marines had targeted systems that required manual replacement of physical components, something the hunters had not planned for. Colonel Foster reported that her Marines had learned valuable lessons about hunter psychology during the boarding actions. The hunters were individually superior, but they relied too heavily on their technology to solve problems. The retreat message the hunters transmitted to the coalition leadership was more disturbing than anything from the previous test. They reported that humans were not just determined but fundamentally different in their approach to warfare. Dr. Grant analyzed the hunter reports and found language that echoed the most frightening Kethvar warnings. The hunters described humans as a species that could not be controlled through conventional methods because they refused to follow conventional logic. Rachel Kim findings showed that human tactics had evolved during the battle in ways that surprised even human commanders. The Marines had developed new techniques for fighting cybernetic opponents in real time. The second test had confirmed the most worrying aspects of the ancient warnings about humans. They really did adapt faster than their enemies could counter, and they really did find ways to turn any advantage against its owner, Admiral. Wells received the battle reports with growing concern. The coalition tests were proving that human nature had not changed since the ancient wars with the Kethvar, but each test also taught humanity more about their galactic neighbors. Victoria Shaw continued analyzing coalition technology, looking for patterns that might help in future encounters. She had learned that advanced civilizations often developed blind spots that could be exploited by less sophisticated opponents. The coalition response to the second test was swift and decisive. They could not allow humans to continue demonstrating capabilities that challenged the basic assumptions of galactic warfare. Jennifer Morgan returned to Earth with most of her fleet intact, but carrying knowledge that changed everything. Humans had faced immortal cybernetic beings with impossible technology, and won through creativity and determination. The Hunter withdrawal message included predictions about human capabilities that made coalition leaders reconsider their entire approach to the testing program. The Hunters warned that humans might be impossible to contain through military means. Diane Foster debriefing sessions revealed that her Marines had enjoyed the challenge of fighting superior opponents. They had found the experience educational rather than discouraging, which worried military psychologists. The pattern was becoming clear to everyone involved. Humans really were different from every other species in ways that made them potentially uncontrollable by any conventional method. The coalition sent urgent messages to their member species warning that the human tests were revealing capabilities that exceeded even the ancient Kethvar warnings. The species that never backs down was proving more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Admiral Wells began preparing for a final test that would determine the future relationship between humanity and the 47 species of the Galactic Coalition. The aliens had learned that humans could not be defeated through military action. The next test would not be about warfare or technology, but about the fundamental question of whether humans could be trusted with the power their nature gave them. The final evaluation would determine if humanity would be accepted as allies or marked for extinction. The final test came not as a battle but as a revelation. The coalition transmitted a message to Earth that changed everything humans thought they knew about their place in galactic history. The truth was more complex and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Fleet Admiral Patricia Collins found herself representing humanity before the assembled leaders of 47 alien civilizations. The meeting took place aboard a massive coalition station that could house representatives from every member species. Ambassador Zithka began the revelation by explaining the coalition true history. They were not the dominant galactic power they had claimed to be. Instead, they were the survivors of species that had faced extinction when the Kethvar Empire reached its peak of power. The coalition had survived only because humanity had unknowingly broken the greatest military threat the galaxy had ever faced. The destruction of the Kethvar Empire 12,000 years ago had saved civilizations that humans had never met. Dr. Helen Grant presented her final analysis of the Kethvar records to the assembled aliens. Her translations revealed details about the ancient war that neither species had fully understood. The conflict had lasted for over 1,000 years. The Kethvar had possessed technology that could destroy star systems and fleets that numbered in the millions. Their conquest machine had seemed unstoppable until they encountered primitive humans who refused to accept that. Resistance was futile. Commander Alexis Turner had led the archaeological team studying the complete Kethvar records. The final translations revealed the aliens' true fear. It was not human military capability that terrified them, but human psychology itself. The Kethvar analysts had studied human behavior during their long war and reached conclusions that challenged their understanding of intelligent life. Humans possessed something that no other species had demonstrated: the complete inability to accept permanent defeat. Other species would eventually reach a breaking point where continued resistance became impossible. But human psychology seemed to have no such limitations. They would find new ways to fight even when all hope appeared lost. The coalition revealed their real purpose in testing humanity. They needed to know if modern humans still possessed the traits that had broken galactic history. Their decision would affect the future of every species in known space. Ambassador Zithka explained the choice facing the coalition. They could accept humanity as allies, knowing that humans would eventually surpass every other species in capability. Or they could unite all galactic civilizations in a war to prevent human expansion. The stakes could not be higher. If the coalition chose war, they would be committing every species to a conflict that might last for millennia, based on the Kethvar example. But if they chose alliance, they would be accepting eventual human dominance of the galaxy. Admiral Collins realized that the tests had never been about measuring human military strength. They had been designed to confirm whether the ancient warnings about human nature were still accurate. The answer was clearly yes. Dr. Grant presented evidence that human psychology had not changed significantly since the ancient wars. The same traits that had frustrated the Kethvar were still present in modern humans. They still refused to accept defeat and still adapted faster than enemies could counter. The coalition faced an impossible decision. Humans had proven they could not be defeated through conventional warfare. They had also proven they could not be controlled or contained through military means. Yet their expansion into space was accelerating. Patricia Collins understood that humanity needed to make its own choice. They could try to reassure the coalition about human intentions, or they could acknowledge what everyone already knew. Human nature made them potentially the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The decision came down to trust. The coalition could trust that humans would use their capabilities responsibly, or they could assume that human nature would eventually lead to galactic domination. The ancient warnings suggested the latter was inevitable. Commander Turner revealed the final piece of evidence from the Kethvar records. The ancient aliens had tried to change human nature through genetic manipulation, biological warfare, and psychological conditioning. Nothing had worked because the traits they feared were fundamental to human identity. The coalition representatives discussed their options in languages humans could not understand, but their body language suggested deep disagreement. Some species wanted to accept humanity as allies, while others insisted that prevention was the only safe choice. Zithka announced the coalition decision in words that would echo through galactic history. They had chosen to offer humanity partnership in governing galactic civilization. The alternative was too dangerous for everyone involved. The offer came with conditions. Humans would need to accept responsibility for protecting species that could not protect themselves. They would need to help maintain peace between civilizations that had been enemies for thousands of years. Admiral Collins realized that the coalition was not offering friendship, but necessity. They needed human determination and adaptability to solve problems that conventional diplomacy could not handle. Humanity was being recruited as galactic peacekeepers. The truth about human reputation was finally complete. The ancient warnings had described humans as the species that never backs down from challenges, but also as the species that never abandons those under their protection. Dr. Grant found additional records showing that ancient humans had not just fought the Kethvar, but had protected other species from Kethvar aggression. Human resistance had inspired galactic rebellion, but human protection had saved countless lives. The coalition archival records contained hundreds of references to human reliability in keeping promises. Even when keeping those promises required enormous sacrifice, humans had proven they would honor their commitments. Patricia Collins accepted the coalition offer on behalf of humanity, with words that became legendary throughout the galaxy. She promised that humans would protect any species that asked for help, regardless of the cost or difficulty involved. The formal ceremony establishing humanity as coalition peacekeepers was attended by representatives from thousands of worlds. Many of these beings were descendants of species that had been saved by ancient human resistance. Commander Turner was chosen to establish the first human diplomatic mission to coalition space. Her job would be helping other species understand human psychology and learning to work with beings who thought differently than humans. The ancient warnings remained, carved in stone throughout the galaxy, but their meaning had evolved. They no longer described a threat to be avoided, but allies who could be trusted with impossible responsibilities. The final entry in the Coalition Historical Archives summarized the human evaluation in terms that satisfied everyone involved. Humans were indeed the species that never backs down, but they were also the species that never breaks faith with their allies. Earth received the news of coalition partnership with mixed emotions. Humanity had gained access to galactic civilization, but had also accepted responsibility for protecting species they barely understood. Dr. Grant established a research program to study coalition member species and their various needs. The diversity of galactic life was staggering, and each species presented unique challenges for human peacekeepers. Admiral Collins began organizing human forces for their new role as galactic protectors. The job would require skills that went far beyond military capability, but human adaptability suggested they could learn whatever was needed. The story of the ancient warnings had reached its conclusion. Humanity had proven that their legendary determination was real, but had also shown that this determination could be channeled toward protection rather than conquest. The galaxy settled into a new pattern, with humans serving as the final arbiters in conflicts that other species could not resolve. The species that never backs down had found their true purpose in a universe that needed protectors who would never give up. The Kethvar warnings lived on as historical documents that explained how the galaxy had been saved by the most unlikely heroes, ancient humans, with primitive technology had changed galactic history through nothing more than absolute refusal to surrender. The final message transmitted to Earth from the Coalition summarized everything in words that would be remembered forever. Humans keep their promises, all of them, even the ones that seem impossible. The species that never backs down had become the Galaxy Guardians,